Hello, I'm Sudhir Mata. I'm the Group Vice President of Products here at Juniper's AI-driven enterprise. You'll meet some great people at the AI in Action event in London. Look who I just run into, the folk from Musgrave, Neil Collins. Neil, thank you very much for joining me for a quick conversation.
You're more than welcome, Sudhir.
So I want to talk about your experience with Juniper Networks, but before we do that, tell us a little bit about Musgrave.
So Musgrave is a family-owned company. It's about 148 years old. We're the largest private sector with our retail partners, sector employer on the island of Ireland. And we feed 1 in 3 people every day on the island of Ireland.
And your role there?
I look after the IT operations in about 850 stores. From an IT operations, that would be router in every store. Routers, switches, access points, and then some of the PCs and EPOS systems from a support perspective.
So what does digital transformation look like in retail?
From Musgrave's perspective, and in particular for our SuperValu and Centra brands, right, we had old legacy technology. So about 3 years ago, we engaged with Juniper. We went through a tender process. And the outcome of that now is we have a generational jump in our network technology in our stores. A simple point in that is, in the old world, if we were upgrading our network in a store, 4 teams would go in, right? It would be 2 out-of-hours visits and 1, possibly 2 daytime visits. In the new world, it's 1 visit and it's 1 engineer, right? So from a retailer point of view, you're talking about 3 disruptions to a store, 2 of them out of hours, to no disruption to a store. We can replace the network in under 1 minute outage time in all our stores. And we're on that road now from a rollout perspective.
Describe the anatomy of that 1 minute. How does one engineer go and execute a cutover with only 1 minute outage?
So if we take it's a small step back.
Yeah.
So we would have gone through some research and testing with yourselves.
Yeah.
Right. And then we knew we had to do this over 850 times.
Right.
So we piloted in 15 stores. So we really were honed in on our processes, and in particular the ZTP, the zero touch ZTP, zero touch deployment process. And for that, it was all about the router and the switch. So on our cellular network, we bring up the router, deploy the switch, and then we're only switching for that 30 seconds. We're only then moving the circuit from the old to the new Juniper router. But all of the config is all in Mist. So we have everything automated. The engineer, he can download the config, he can get it operational in seconds, really.
So basically, you're building a parallel network while the store is actually operating normally.
Yes.
And on a secondary circuit, essentially. And the last thing you do is make that the primary network.
We make it the primary network, absolutely. And as I say, with the pilot stores, the focus is all about our customer, the retailer. How do we minimize? And they're very much cost focused because it's retail. And the real benefit is they're not paying for people out of hours. They're not paying for network engineers. They're not paying for Musgrave to come in and do stuff. As I say, it's 1 engineer, 1 visit, and we're done.
1 engineer, 1 visit, 1 minute outage.
1 minute outage.
And you're doing this during the operational hours of the store.
During operational hours of the store.
Wow, stunning.
Yeah.
How did you actually hear about Juniper first?
So we would have 1 or 2 engineers. I would call them the research and test, right? So they went out. They knew we had a looming legacy out of support challenge coming. And they would have went out and they would have picked, via Gartner and other research, would have picked the top quadrant Wi-Fi, and then the WAN edge providers, and Juniper came up top, right? And then we would have taken that into the lab, working with your pre-sales team into our labs to prove the concepts. And we would have had some great experiences there, some challenges, but some great experience. We can do this, right? We literally can do zero touch deployed.
And so from the lab, you went into a POC. How many vendors did you take to actually a POC?
We only took 1 vendor.
1 vendor.
So we went through a fairly rigorous lab process.
Yeah.
And there was a wider tending process. But once we got out of the lab, we were going at 1. We had moved to preferred supplier at that stage.
Very good, very good. And then now, what has been the experience from a store's perspective? Because you are actually IT for retailers that are franchisees.
Yes.
Hard to sell to them, and it's a whole different end game. So how did that work?
So Musgrave would pride itself on having a very strong relationship with the retailer. When we say retailers, they really are partners, right?
That's right.
So there's absolutely a cost focus, but as well as that, the criticality of having a really robust service. We cannot have the consumer standing at a till waiting for a credit card transaction,
right,
or a loyalty app to give it some information, right? So from the retailer perspective, one, the outage, two, the costs, because the costs are managed, right? But three, what they're seeing now, right, is, and we knew it once we started to survey our stores, right? Service degradation is a killer in the stores, right? If you have a service outage, you get it fixed.
Correct.
But service degradation, 10, 20%, if that's 10 minutes a day or 20 minutes a day because my Wi-Fi doesn't work in that part of the store, you add that up over a year, and that can become hundreds, thousands of dollars, right, or euros. So you've the service degradation bit, which Mist is brilliant at identifying. We've gone from a position where we didn't know whether an AP was up or down in our stores. Now we know the APs are up and down, but we know all the devices that are connected to the APs. So our visibility into the stores, our ability to be able to ring a retailer and say, your handheld, it's in the back office, right? Or I've had one retailer ring me a couple of nights after we went live saying, I got a phone call the other night. We were here working late in the office and we turned something off, and we got a phone call saying, are you okay? And that was the first time it made it real for the retailer that every device is being monitored in his store, right? And another retailer was saying, when I talk about the service degradation, right, they pulled someone who was spending their time with a slow network. They would have to pull them from that, reduce the time that they were spending on that once we put in the new network, and move them to the impulse category, which is the better margin goods. So not only was he saving money with the better network, but he was selling more of high value products.
Wow.
So the very real examples of the benefits to the retailers.
Yeah. And so you got the network, you're obviously in the midst of deployment. How far along in the deployment, and what is next after this?
So from a deployment point of view, we've just broken through 100 stores, having started in earnest in July. We'll do 300 next year, 300 the following year. That's the ROI done. And in parallel, at the back end of that, we'll do what we would call Northern Ireland, or what's called Northern Ireland, another 140 stores, right? So we'll have our networks upgraded across the estate. And then when we think about the next steps, there's very practical kind of operational ideas there, right? We're going to upgrade our handhelds, right? Maybe 3,000 handhelds, but now we're able to track them, right? Because Musgrave own the handhelds and they're expensive. That's a game changer for us from a security point of view and asset management perspective. We're looking at, with our loyalty apps, we were deploying the AP33s at every entrance, right? So with our loyalty apps and some SDK work, that when you walk in with your Frank and Honest or your Real Rewards loyalty app, we'll get a prompt, welcome, or there's a sale today, 3 for 2 or something like that. So that's that engagement with the consumer, which is critical, that handshake when they come in the door. And then some other ideas, then some practical things. We're rolling out a lot of marketing screens. It's all wireless.
Nice.
Right. You're saving the retailer, again, having to run cables. And cables, what comes with cables is problems.
So we talked about the impact to retailers. They're able to get things done fast. They're able to actually, allocate resources to high value products. Deployments are going, cutovers are fast. What's been the impact to your team? How do they feel?
The anecdote that I use at work is from an IT perspective, right, as opposed to retail. From an IT perspective, 6 months ago, I was outside the library. Now someone has given me a library card and I'm walking in and I have all this information. And missed the SLEs, everything that we need. With the AIs, we've done great work on AIs. Kevin McCartan, our our lead network engineer, what he's been able to do regarding the storing of the configs, the automatic deployment to it in advance of going into stores, it's transformative.
Yeah, speaking of Kevin, he picked up automation and become a passion now. Talk about any impact to automation. Where were you before and what does this enable?
So before, to get a router into a store, right, it was taken from a warehouse, it was brought to a config center where we put the base deployment on it, then a network engineer brought it to store and did the final configuration. With work that Kevin has done, that's now off the shelf, basically from the warehouse into the store, with someone like Neil Collins, who isn't a network engineer, and I'm configuring it. I'm just downloading the config. One touch and it's done.
Awesome. So complete transformation in
Absolutely,
IT processes and enabling digital experience for retail.
Absolutely, yes.
Awesome. Thank you so very much for the time, Neil. Always great catching up with you. Really appreciate it.
You're more than welcome.
Yeah. Cheers.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.